good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us back at the top of the hour. I'm Mark Johnston, your host here for VID5, brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Laurentian Bank Securities. And at this point, I have the great pleasure to welcome a colleague who we've walked with before at VID conferences, Peter Dougherty, who's the president and CEO of Argonaut Gold. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the bank for putting on this virtual conference. This morning, we'll be talking to you about Argonaut Gold. I'm excited to share with you our story and our journey as we build what we believe is Canada's next gold mine, and we continue to do so. Today, I'll be giving you the December of 2021 presentation. Now, with all presentations that you've heard from many today, we will be making forward-looking statements based upon the best knowledge that we have as of today. But it is based upon what we know today and our estimates of what may happen in the future. It's not with 100% accuracy, but our best knowledge as of today. So let's get right to it. When we think about Argonaut Gold, what I want to present you with is all the upside without the risk. We think Argonaut checks all the right boxes for an investor. When we think about our company as a whole, we're a little bit unique. We're that small, kind of boutique kind of company with all the big company attributes that you're looking for. Whether it's the sizzle of exploration, which we have going on with our Magino deep drilling and our La Colorada deep drilling, to that of a development story, and you're looking for that re-rate of a company who's going through development and what can happen in the future, we provide that in spades with our Magino Construction progress. That is all underpinned by strong operations, which are tracking towards record production and record cash flow with solid earnings. So all the upside without the risk. And that's what we provide in an Argonaut share. Now, moving forward, we are committed to sustainability. It is the very calling card that allows us to run the business that we do. Whether it be from solar farms to replanting or protective species or air quality monitoring, we are at the forefront of trying to provide within our communities a safe and reportable in an operating fashion that is sustainable over time. I'm happy to report that the company for over 10 years down in Mexico has received the ESR award, Environmentally Socially Responsible Company. And we have been named 4 times during that 10 years as the #1 small company in all industry in Mexico for our efforts in this environmentally socially responsible type company initiatives. Now, moving on to where we are a intermediate producer. We focus on the Americas. When we think about where we're operating today, we have 3 mines operating down in Mexico, our La Colorada, our El Castillo, and our San Agustin mine. And here in the U.S., in Nevada, we have the Florida Canyon mine. Now, those mines combined together will produce about 200 to 250,000 ounces this year, and will do so at a respectable cost. When we think about the history of the company, we've been around for about 11 years. We produced about 1.6 million ounces at about $800 all-in cost for the operations, which is a respectable cost. At the end of September, we had nearly $170 million of cash on the balance sheet with $58 million in a convertible debenture on the books. And we have an undrawn revolving credit facility of nearly $125 million at a very reasonable rate of LIBOR plus 2.25. Now, we have 2 exciting development projects we're going to talk about today a bit more. First being the Magino project up in Canada. This is a very large scale project that is in construction today. And the second project is our Cerro del Gallo project in Mexico. Another very large scale project. These projects host nearly 5 million ounces already, and we see that growing over time. So when we started this company, very simple construct, put together these little pearls, which are representative by Florida Canyon, La Colorada, San Agustin, and El Castillo, and look for a large pendant, which are the Magino type projects, these large 5 million ounce plus deposits. then build that pendant, and then start to upscale the overall portfolio, which we are today with Cerro del Gallo, which is another very large scale project. So let's move right into our strategy and our philosophy and our 3-year history of where we've been. Our goal is really to transform this company, transform it from this higher cost, short mine life producer of 150 to 200,000 ounces, transform it into something bigger and better. When we look at it from a production standpoint, we have seen rising production. When we think about it from an operating or cost perspective, relatively flat cost profile over the last 3 years. But since we've seen that rising production profile and a relatively flat cost profile, that's led to record cash flow this year and a rising cash flow environment for the company, and allows us to build and bring forth more as we look to the future. So let's move on to what we've been able to do on that cash flow. Here's a look at the quarterly production and cash flow. As you can see, that production curve has been rising here over the past year. And with that, the cash flow has also increased. That's demonstrating consistency in how we're running the operations and consistency in the cash that can be generated by this business to allow it to build towards the future. And that's what really gets us excited, because we think that a larger company, maybe in the 300,000 ounce a year range, is a sustainable business over time. So here's a look at our reserves and resource growth over this past 5-year history. And I think this is very poignant when you think about resource type companies like ourselves. We're in a business where when you woke up yesterday and got out of bed, things are different today than they were yesterday, and they're going to be different tomorrow. We live in what we call a depletable environment. What we had is now no longer there. So it's key to always be replacing and building towards that future. We have had a fantastic run. Since 2016 to where we were at the end of 2020, our reserves have grown nearly double, and our resources have also nearly doubled during that time frame. It speaks to the commitment to this business over the long haul. Now, when we think about 2021 guidance, things are looking up and looking very nicely at this point in time. Through the first 9 months of the year, about 182,000 ounces of gold produced. We think that we're guiding towards that higher end for the full year. When we think about our cost, we're guiding and we're seeing cost on that lower end of the projected. So that means that our costs are guiding towards the lower half of what we had anticipated, which yields greater cash flow. We had set a goal at the beginning of the year to generate roughly about $100 million worth of cash. Well, through 9 months of the year, that's $107 million. So we're well on our way, as you can see from the prior page, that we'll be able to achieve towards that higher end of guidance there as well. So things are running very nicely from an operating standpoint so far. Again, as I talked about earlier, when we think about our strategy, we have been known as a high-cost producer with very short mine lives, producing between 150 and 200,000 ounces per annum. Our goal is to become this 300,000+ ounce a year producer, and to do so with longer-term projects that represent the lower quartile of cost. Underpinning that strategy is a 3-phased approach of harvest, replace, and growth. Harvesting cash out of the existing operations, record cash flow coming this year, as we talked about. Replacing those depleted ounces through exploration and through our existing assets, which I talked about before, our track record. Now let's look at the growth side of things. We have over $1 billion worth of assets in the growth pipeline that we need to unlock. And as we do so, we add tremendous value and upside for our shareholders, because as a small scale producing company, we are trading at about 0.6 times our net asset value. But if we can unlock that growth potential on nearly $1 billion worth, now we can see real substantial change in the overall share price of this company. So let's look at each one of these phases. First is the harvest phase. Now we operate very challenging mines. The grades that we process are around 0.3 to 0.6 grams per ton, very low grade material. But we've been able to successfully operate these projects and generate real cash at the end of the day. And that's what this business is about, generating the real cash and having projects that not only produce, but produce to build towards the future. As I said, the goal was to grab these individual pearls, and I think we have 4 unique ones here in El Castillo, San Agustin, La Colorada, and Florida Canyon. They will produce between 200 and 250,000 ounces this year and generate between $100 and $140 million worth of cash back to the business. So let's move on to the next phase, that replace phase, because we are living in a depletable environment. I am very excited to report to you that we have had a fantastic year this year in that replace phase. It's something we're committed to, and the success this year is unparalleled. We're looking here on this slide at our La Colorada property and the open pit called El Crestone that we are operating today. When we originally put this project, La Colorada, back into production, we had 3 different pits that we were running. The first pit being the La Colorada Grand Central pit, which we have finished mining. The second pit being the El Crestone pit, which we are currently actively mining in. And the third pit, the Veta Madre pit, which we have just opened up and are starting to actively mine there. So this is the second of 3 pits. We are in operating today, and we decided to drill a bit deeper underneath this pit. Now, what I want to draw your eye to is what the results are that we released in April and then what we're seeing in September. Because right now, today, this historically has been an open pit mine where we are mining the halo around these high-grade veins or chutes that were mined earlier in the 1800s, early 1900s, before the Mexican Revolution. What we found is that we were mining about a 0.55 grams per ton in the open pit today. And when we started to drill underneath the existing pit, we saw substantial intersects and substantial grades coming to us. Nearly 100 grams per ton or 50 grams per ton on some of these intercepts, which are unheard of in Mexico. But we're quite pleased with what we're seeing. Now we'll take another look at some of these cross sections, or just a slice through of bread through this operation today. So here's a look at the B prime section that we saw on the earlier page. You can see outlined on this very faintly, but you can see outlined, and I'll draw with my cursor just where the outline of the pit sits. It's a thin black line. That's where we are today, actively mining. So all the drilling has been done beneath that. And we have identified somewhere about 250 meters below that mineralization that we think is very strong and very representative, where you can see 100+ gram type material coming to the surface. We think this represents phase 2 for this operation. And it's not just one drill hole, but it's multiple drill holes that are carrying these kind of grades. Now, we knew historically that these old-time miners had mined these individual veins themselves, but we had no idea what we were looking at. Typically in Mexico, if you're running 2 to 4 grams per ton underground, you've got a very profitable mine, because the average cost that you need in grade is about 2.5 grams per ton to make money. So as you can see, with some of these higher grades that are substantial in nature and width, you now have something that's starting to look very, very interesting towards the future. As we look at this next slide, that's not all that we're looking at. Again, as I said, in order to be able to triple or grow those resources, you have to invest in the future. We did so at our San Agustin mine in Mexico as well. Now, we held originally all the blue outlined areas. The yellow outlined areas belong to a very large Mexican mining company, Fresnillo. We did a transaction with Fresnillo about 3 years ago and extended the life of our El Castillo mine by 3 years. We just completed our second transaction with the Fresnillo group, where we picked up the yellow areas. What's interesting is that our existing open pit mine that we are operating with is that little red dashed circle. Right next to it are 4 concessions that were owned by Fresnillo, and we think that potential to expand that pit is reasonable, and we think it's something that is achievable for us towards the future. But that's not all that we got with this transaction. We got all the remaining area of this big San Agustin claim in yellow. So we think we've really increased our opportunity towards the future with a 4 times or quadrupling of our mineral tenure. So let's look at the growth phase, because I think this really underpins a lot of the story, and it's part of what everybody is interested in looking within when they buy a share in the company. So first, I'll talk about our Magino project. This is in Ontario, Canada. It will be an open pit milling operation. Now, what we've identified is the opportunity to look at a 5 million ounce resource. The first phase of this resource will be a 10,000 ton per day operation, and it'll last for 10 years of truly mining and production over a 17-year life for that first 10,000 ton per day operation. It will take about 2 million of the 5 million ounces, so plenty more to work with. We are currently in construction, and as I said before, you're trying to unlock $1 billion worth of value in this $1,700, $1,800 environment. The second project that we hold is our Cerro del Gallo project in Mexico. This is in the state of Guanajuato, where mining has been occurring for over 300 years. It is a place where we believe, again, we have about 4.7 million ounces on a gold equivalent ounce basis. And we believe that, again, you would do this in phases, where the first phase would be for 15 years, producing roughly around 80,000 ounces per annum. And then that second phase could look at expanding beyond that. That first phase would take about 1.5 million ounces out of this 4.7 million ounces. So again, very large scale projects. First phase is bite size with the potential to expand. So we'll spend a little bit more time here on this as we move forward. Now, this is our Magino project and the timeline. As you can see, we've gone through the first 3 quarters of the year. Things are underway. Things are moving along. It's hard to tell when you look at some of the pictures, but you really wonder, when you're building a house, it seems to take so long at the beginning when you're doing all the preparation work, where you're getting the dirt dug out, you're preparing the foundations, and you're bringing in the water and the sewer and the electrical to get that house going. We're at that stage. We've completed all that work, and now we are into pouring the pillars and foundation and steel erection at this time. Things are going well. We're on schedule to have this project up and running, with production coming to us by the first quarter of 2023. So tracking quite nicely, meeting with our partners Ausenco and being able to deliver that, and things look good. So let's look at some of the pictures of what's going on. From the early days, we have been involved with our communities and also with the regulators. We think that is imperative to delivering any solid project as we look to the future. We also believe in working with them to partner with them so we can have a project that will last over time. Down below, you'll see our environmental manager working with the First Nations partner here of Michipicoten. And then you'll also see the main lodge for the Magino project. What I want to draw your attention to think about this, with that particular project, we are taking over an old site that was abandoned and left behind, a mill site in the area, and now repurposing it and being able to reuse that again, this time as a man camp or a main lodge for our employees working at the site. Again, trying to work in harmony instead of looking at coming in and starting brand new. We are trying to come in and work together with our communities and our partners within the area. Here are some more photos. You can see from June to late November, early December, you can see the progress that's being made. It's a lot of early preparation and site work, but I draw your attention to the late November, where you can see in the bottom part of the picture the steel that is being bolted together and waiting for erection that will happen. The next slide will give you another idea of what's coming here in the near future regarding this project. In Q1 of 2022, our main components will be shipped to the site. Those are the main operating pieces that are necessary to bring a project online. I'm happy to report that things are moving along nicely. And when we think about this, I'm glad that we got our project started when we did, because right now, today, our main components are completed. And that is a fantastic place to be, because right now, as new companies are trying to get up and moving, they're finding a bit of a struggle to be able to get the people and the resources to get everything moving. We are already in that progress and in that stage. We anticipate by the end of 2022 to have mechanical completion along with the power and the tailings dam approved and ready to roll. So that leaves us 3 months to get that first gold pour. I think we're well on target to do that, and things are moving along nicely. As I talked with our construction guys yesterday, it seems like they may even be a little bit ahead of that schedule, but we have yet to go through a full winter up there. Now let's talk about expansion and what's happening at Magino, because we believe we're at the tip of the iceberg of what's going on. This is a picture looking at what we call the Goudreau Deformation District. From Renabi on the far right-hand side of this slide that represents a past producer for Barrick of over 1 million ounces, to the Eagle River Complex of Wesdome on the far left-hand side of the picture, you're talking about 125 kilometers, with Magino and the Island Gold Mine sitting squarely in the center where Alamos runs the Island Gold Project. What we see here is this is a large-scale district with potential that is tremendous. Now, there have already been 15 million ounces found. 5 of those are hosted at Magino. And we think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what can happen in this area. Now, here's just a pictorial to draw your attention to what's happening in resources in and around the Magino property. When I talk about this 5 million ounce deposit, I'm talking about all the ounces in the open pit side of the project. That is 300 meters and above to the surface. So when we think about that, that's a pretty large mineralized development group right there that's already been identified. Now, when we think about our next 2 closest mines that are running, the Island Gold, which is about 100 meters away, and we think about the Eagle River Complex, most of that mineralization they have is at significant depth. We're talking anywhere from 1,000 to 1.5 kilometers in depth. And you can see the kind of ounces they have found. About 2.5 years ago, we started drilling on the Magino project to start to look at depth. We have over 80,000 meters of drilling. And guess what? We're seeing the same thing play out on our particular project, just like we're seeing next door at Alamos and what's going on down at the Eagle River Complex. So we're quite excited about this and think that things are moving along nicely. When I look at the mineralized resources and reserves and what we could possibly do at Magino, what gets us excited is what we're seeing right closest to the border. What I draw people's attention to when I look at this particular slide is I see that when I think about the nearest proxy, which is the Alamos's Island Gold Mine, we see that the grades do increase with depth. We also see 3 distinct mineral zones: the eastern, the central, and the western zone. Today, we have identified what we call our central and elbow zone, which would be equivalent to what they call their eastern zone. We think that that mineralization is very similar to what's going on next door. And we're quite excited by that. And over time, we'll continue to build that out. Now, our goal this year was really to drill out that central and elbow zone on a much tighter scale, something along a 40-meter kind of spacing on the first 250 to 500 meters of depth. And then from 500 to 1,000 meters in depth, we wanted to get that on an 80-meter kind of spacing. Well, we've completed that program, and I'm happy to say that it looks like we have good continuity and things coming together on the project. Now, when we think about this project and where we lie today, this is what we call a plan view. There is a dashed or hashed area that represents the property line between ourselves and Alamos Gold. That elbow and central zone, you'll see it here represented on our closest to that dashed line, that black dashed line. Then you'll see our what we call our central zone, or our Scotland 42 Sandy and South zones. And then you'll see all the way to the left-hand side what we call the South zones. And you'll see these holes 57, 70, 71, and 424. Those represent some of the best drill holes that we have on this project today and really get us excited. When we kicked off that 80,000 meter drill program that we've completed so far to date, we really wanted to get a better handle on what was going on structurally. So we followed the structures across from the Alamos project onto our property. And they're representative of these blue lines that you see in there. They're called Goudreau dikes. And whenever Alamos had gotten close to these Goudreau dikes, they had found existing mineralization to be rising. Well, guess what? We started to use that same tracing, and guess what? We found mineralization in the elbow and central zone. Our guys finished off that wildcat or early stage drilling after nearly 20,000 meters of drilling. Then they moved to the west, and they hit on every time that they drilled in that central zone area with Scotland 42 Sandy and South. That was significant. And then they went further west and hit with the South zone nearly 1.5 kilometers away with some of the best drill holes on the property. So I'm quite confident that our team has kind of figured out how this thing works, and they're being very successful with their dollars and not wasting dollars as they move forward. So here is a depiction of what things could look like underneath the pit. The open pit is representative by the light brown lines, as you will see up above. Now, underneath that, as I said, our goal in this little red box was to drill out the central and elbow zones to a 40-meter spacing. We felt that if we could do this, we could get a good semblance of what the mineralization might look like, and then be able to step back and say, how would we attack this from underground mining? Additionally, we drilled at deeper depths to try and get a flavor where we could get that down to an 80-meter spacing of what was going on from 500 to 1,000 meters in depth. Now, as we move to the left, just outside this red box, you'll see several lines representing drill holes in little yellow hits. Those are that Scotland 42 Central and South zone. And then, as I said, the far left-hand side, some of our best drill holes on this project at this step, and they are truly incredible. You'll see 424, 7.5 meters at nearly 30 grams, 057 at 3 meters at 47 grams, and you'll see at depth on 057, another 10 meters at 19 grams. These are significant intercepts with significant widths. The interesting thing, as I pointed out earlier, when we look at the Island Gold Complex, it's about 1.5 kilometers in length with 3 distinct kind of decorated zones. We see the same thing coming together here and being replicated, but time will tell. We need to do more work over the next coming years, and we're not shying away from putting our money and our effort towards drilling this out to see what the future will bring. This year was $11.5 million. Next year, I would anticipate that we'll be spending equal to kind of spending on this particular project as we continue to trace it out and see what the future will bring us. Now, this is a look at the early resource definition over there in that central and elbow zone area. This is looking at the elbow zone. As I said, you can see these splotches of red. That represents good continuity. And you can see the holes that we have drilled. It's really starting to come together, and it shows us that there is great potential to do more here. So a little bit less consolidated on the 500 meters to 1,000 meters, but the 250 to 500 meters, good consolidation of the drilling and good representation of mineralization. So let's move forward to what we think Magino can be. This is our big dream slide with us, and I want you to follow us on this journey. We have permitted this project for 35,000 tons per day. We have built this project on a footprint for 35,000 tons per day. What we think is that that's a great thing to do up front. But it's all about what's bite-sized and what's capable for this company up to start with. we're going to do that at 10,000 ton per day. And when we look at this particular project at 10,000 tons per day is game changing to us. In those first 5 years of production, we'll get 150,000 ounces per annum at $700 cost. We think that if you take that, and that represents about 60 million tons of material that could go into that tails impoundment of 165 million tons, we have substantial potential to improve and expand. Looking at the reserve and resource that still sits there, the other 3 million ounces, it shows great potential. And this drilling that we're doing underground, well, that's starting to come together. And we're trying to get, as I said, to a point where we can substantially pull this together. It will be at what we call a scoping level study that we're trying to pull together that mineralization. We think by the end of the first quarter, we'll have a good indication of what we're looking at for tonnage here. Not a full 43-101 releasable, but a good understanding what that could be. And what our vision is that Magino becomes a 20,000 ton per day operating facility with 19,000 ton per day coming from the open pit and 1,000 ton per day coming from underground. And with the grades that we're seeing, that could yield a 300,000 ounce a year producer. So think about this for a moment. At 10,000 ton per day, this is a game changer to us at 150,000 ounces per annum. At 20,000 ton per day, this is a 300,000 ounce a year producer. And it's something that's already permitted to get there. It would just need another train built right next to the one that they are building today. That could be substantial for anybody's portfolio, just not only ours, but for others. So what we're excited about is that potential to bring the whole future together and something that could really change. So what does it take to get there? Well, it takes time and it takes effort. As I said, this year we are spending a great deal of money on the Magino project, $11 million in drilling in and around the Magino project. A lot of that went towards that elbow and central zone. Nearly over half of that money went to that area where we're trying to drill it out to get that resource definition. We're drilling it at 40 meter spacing, which is representative of what our next door neighbor has done. So we think that's where the majority of the money went this year. That's where it will go probably next year, is in trying to get that first 250 meters to 500 meters down in depth, get that drilled off at a substantially nice tight program, just like they run next door, and then be able to move that forward. So quite excited about what that brings to us, and to let you know that we're guaranteed towards the future of potential pathway. So lastly, our Cerro del Gallo project. This is a heap leach project down in Mexico that we're in permitting stage right now. As I said, about 4.5 million gold equivalent ounces. We think this is a relatively inexpensive build, somewhere in the 130 to $35 million. We think that this has potential to grow over time. We're in the stage, as I said, as permitting. The first phase, again, will be just like Magino. We'll do it in 2 phases. The first phase will be a 15-year life. Take about 1.5 million ounces out of this 4.7 million ounces. That allows phase 2 to come in and maybe probably step up this production profile as well. So quite excited by this project too. It's early stages, and it's a place where mining has gone on for years, and a place where we think we can be very successful. It's basically the diagram of everything we've done at El Castillo and our other projects in Mexico, with the exception that the strip ratio is lower and the grades are nearly double at 0.6 grams per ton. So quite excited by this. So that brings us to what we call the Lassonde curve. And this is kind of a slingshot rating of what happens in mining companies. When you think about exploration companies and they go through, they hit the first drill hole and everybody gets excited. As they get to a discovery, it rises to the top, and it rises very quickly. You have the same thing happen when a company goes into construction. Usually the share price will fall off significantly. And as they move towards that ramp up stage at the end of development, they get this significant slingshot in re-rating and into operations. We're quite excited by seeing that in both phases, with the exploration work at Magino and La Colorada, and then at Magino with the construction profile. So 2 opportunities to see substantial shift in the share price. Now, when we think about metal producers out there today, junior peer producers, median's about 3.3 times EBITDA to EBITDA. So when we think about where Argonaut sits, we're trading at about 2.5. And when you think about intermediate producers, these 300 to 500,000 ounce a year producers, the range is about 5.7. And you look at that in relation to our 2.5, that leaves substantial, and I mean substantial, opportunity to really expand and grow the future of this business and our share price. What are our near-term catalysts? Pretty simple. Magino Construction Progress, there's a monthly newsletter that goes out with photos and updates as to what we're doing with our First Nation partners, with our operating partners building this project, and the things that we're accomplishing up there today. We have significant mineralization at depth at Magino and at La Colorada that we're coming out and talking about on a regular basis, and I don't see that slowing down as we move into the future. This completes my presentation as of today, and we'll now turn things back over to Mark as he walks us through a brief question and answer session, and we'll leave this up to you as the callers in to share the questions, and we'll see what we can answer for you. Mark?
Yeah, fantastic, Peter. Once again, a very smooth and informative presentation. The whole team here is always impressed with how you show up with all things in place and a well-rounded tour of the company, where things are at, and the look ahead. I have to say, from the sidelines here with Magino in Ontario, just this concept, it's like a new child being born into the family. There's an excitement at the operation level of what's happening at the company. And some of your previous press releases looking at Q3 results that you issued on November the 15th, we're looking at numbers such as generated nearly 40 million in cash flow during Q3, in spite of the usual challenges with the rainy season in Mexico. 107 million of cash flow generated through the first 9 months of the year, already surpassing the target of 100 million in 2021, and tremendous financial quarter with a 12% increase in net income and a 43% increase in adjusted net income year over year. And that's even really, before exploring some of the potential and the beauty at Magino in Ontario. So congratulations on bringing some good news forward. I know our audience is always happy to hear from you. And to your point, we're going to turn focus now to our questions. We've had a number of quite highly engaged audience members chiming in here with questions. First one out of the gate here, Peter. How has the supply chain issues and inflation impacted the Magino construction project in Ontario?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we're seeing it not only in construction of Magino, but we're seeing it every day when we go to the grocery store. The cost of a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk have just risen substantially. And we're reading reports of 7 to 10% inflation on a monthly basis coming at us in general life. And it's very concerning. For us, I think the two biggest challenges that we've seen at Magino are in the area of fuel has hit us substantially, which we are all feeling that at the gas pump these days. And then secondly, labor. Labor has gone up. It's a tight labor market. We all know that. And that's been a bit of a challenge for us and our contractors. We work with a group called Segerson Northern, and they've had substantial challenges in getting people to the site and moving that forward. And the Asenco group is just getting going with, the concrete team is almost wrapping up, but while that's going on, they're starting with the steel erection. So a new team on board with that. So I think that the biggest challenge has been wages and fuel supplies. As far as the operations are concerned, down in Mexico, things have been pretty stable. I mean, we've seen increases, but we've been able to hold some things in check, as you've seen by the cost profile. We haven't seen it rise dramatically. So we've been able to hold that pretty well in check, but there has been inflation there too.
Very good. Thank you for that. Just moving into the next question here, Peter. You've owned Florida Canyon for a little over a year following the acquisition of Argonaut Gold. Can you discuss any operational improvements you've made to increase production and to perhaps lower operating costs?
Yeah, I'm very excited by what's going on there. The team has really stepped up and taken the lead on this and really pushed that project forward. Today, when we first jumped into the Florida Canyon operation, they were mining and rehandling material multiple times. And what we've been able to do with the team has been able to create what we call a dump pocket, or a place where the truck can actually back up to and deposit its material. Instead of dumping it on the ground, they could dump it directly into the crushing system. And then it could go right from that crushing system right out to the leach pads. Historically, they would bring the material out of the open pit, dump it on the ground, dose it into a pile, pick it up with a loader, dump it into the crushing system, dump it on the ground again, then pick it up, haul it out to the leach pad, dump it on the ground, dose it back out again. I mean, it's just a lot of rehandle. And the team's been able to adopt this dump pocket concept and with an overland conveying and stacking system. And that's all in place today. And that should really make their life go a lot simpler. Now, it's not only about making their life simpler, but it also has a real huge benefit to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're stewards of the environment. And by switching from diesel trucks running and loaders and dozers and everything else through all these different steps, if we're able to go to a grid power driven conveying and stacking system, we now eliminate a lot of that excess handle and a lot of that carbon footprint that we'd be bringing to the table. So, it's not only good for us, but it's good for the environment and the things that we want to protect and maintain over time. So quite happy by what the team's doing there.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you for that. Next question from our audience member, Ryan. Given the exploration success you've had, Peter, at Magino and substantial amount of drilling completed to date, when do you expect to be in a position to release any underground resource? And have delays in assay turnaround times caused any delays to ongoing exploration work?
Yeah, great question, Ryan. I mean, Ryan, we are no different than anybody else in the mining business. The assay labs have been hurt by being able to get people and being able to operate during this COVID timeframe, and it's been a challenge, not only for their business, for a lot of businesses today. And what we found is that the assay times have increased. Now, I've heard of companies waiting 4 months to get their assays back. Mm-hmm. That is just unbelievable to hear people like that. We've been fortunate enough because we've been running a drill program and supplying these assay labs for quite some time. Even during the tough times, we were continuing to drill around the project. And so we have a great relationship, and we're doing much better than that. And the fact that we have 6 individual zones that we've identified underneath Magino, it allows us to drill on one zone, wait for those assays to come back, then move over to another zone and drill. So we're not wasting dollars waiting for an assay to find out, oh, we drilled in an area that didn't have mineralization in it. We actually know what the results are before we go back and forth. And I think it's allowed us to be more efficient with our funds. And to his other part of this question is, when will we have a resource? Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to take some time. I kind of explained that earlier. We're trying to get to what we would call a rough idea of what that resource looks like here in the first quarter of this coming year. Is that going to be a 43-101 disclosable? No, it's going to be an internal scoping kind of level on that. But things are looking like they're coming together nicely, and we'll be able to talk a bit more about what we're seeing from internal scoping about this at that time.
Great, Peter. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Ryan. Given the high-grade results from drilling below the El Creston pit at Colorada, are there any plans to drill below the other open pits?
There are. And that's a great question, because when we think about a historical area like La Colorada that was mined underground by the early date miners, they drilled and they worked over at the La Colorada Grand Central area, and then they worked at the El Creston area. And what we saw was this high-grade mineralization right below El Creston, and we had easy access to it at the time, so we went ahead and started to drill it. We think we have the potential to do some work over at La Colorada Grand Central as well. So, it's another phase, other things going on right now. So, it's all about timing, right? And what we can do.
Understood. Thank you for that, Peter. Next question comes in. With a large-scale, long-life, low-cost asset located in Canada like Magino, where there seem to be lots of exciting exploration potential as well, do you see yourself at this point or in the near future as a takeover target?
I think that in this business, my history, Mark, right? We went through the wholesale to Yamana with Meridian. And you can't run your business or run your life always looking over your shoulder. That's why that little mirror in the car It's called a rear view mirror, and it's very, very small. And we have this big, huge windscreen in front of us, looking us forward. We really have to focus on what lies ahead of us and the things that we have to accomplish in front of us, and not look behind us. And that's a very poignant part of life. And if we do a great job, well, then that speaks to the work that we've done, and everybody will be happy if somebody, if it creates that target. But the greatest way to create value for your shareholders is to be looking through that big windscreen in front of you. That's why the window is so much larger, and not looking in that little rear view mirror.
Wonderful. Great perspective, Peter. Looking forward. Thank you for that. Next question we have, what can you discuss here what the higher grades at the depth of Magino mean for the future of the project?
Well, as I kind of shared on that earlier slide, I think it was slide number 20 or so, about that potential to go to 20,000 ton per day. And we really see that Magino has that potential to not only provide that 20,000 ton per day on the open pit, but also this underground drilling, maybe 1,000 tons per day. And if we could get 1,000 tons per day at, let's call it a 6 to 8 gram, it's a game changer. You don't have to put as many tons through to get those ounces at 6 to 8 grams versus 1 gram, do you?
Right.
So it could really open up the floodgates for Magino and what it can be towards the future.
Terrific. Thank you, Peter. Just a big picture bird's eye view here question for you, Peter. Where do you see the company going in, say, the next 5 years?
We'd like to be that 300,000 to 500,000 ounce a year producer. Running Cerro del Gallo and Magino could be, very close to that alone within the portfolio as it expands out. First stage for us right now is heads down. Let's get Magino in. That first gold pour in Q1 of 23 is absolutely imperative at this stage. So let's push across that line. Let's get that in. Couple that with what we have already, and then let's move towards Cerro del Gallo and really step up that game plan. So that would be the goal, to try and do that, and then look in that year 4 for that expansion at Magino.
Good to hear. Thank you for that. Mark asked a question here. Will you be able to release any numbers, Peter, from that internal scoping study that's mentioned?
We can release in generalities. We cannot release the details of it because it's not at a full 43-101 level type level. Right.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that very much. Always good at this point, Peter, to look at the team behind the company. So one thing that I'm always impressed with your presentation is the discussion about the environment, the relationships with the First Nations communities. These are all key and important criteria for a company moving into the future. What would you say on your team is really some of the top talent and top players that are helping you with this, running the company on a day-to-day basis? Let's get to know your team a little bit more.
Well, what I can tell you is this, Mark, that whilst we get the opportunity, that's Dan Simons and myself, get the opportunity to talk to investors and people like yourself, we really get to share what everybody else is doing. And it really starts with the frontline people who are there every day making a difference. And we have a great team assembled and a group of people that we think are committed and tied in towards growing this company and doing it in a responsible manner. And to that end, I mean, on the exploration front, we have Brian Arkell, who's worked for the big guys, worked for the small guys, done everything through his career. And he is doing a fantastic job with him and Paul Dunbar, the guys up north, and with the guys down in Mexico, and bringing forth the projects down there, whether it be what's happening in La Colorada, which is quite exciting, but also coming together with Fresnillo on a deal. I think this has been underappreciated out there. As I said before, the last time we were able to extend things 3 years. I'm not guaranteeing we can do that again, but heck, this team has been able to prove that if we give them the opportunity, they can find different things in different ways. From the operating side, Low and the operating teams are doing a fantastic job, making a difference every day. These are not easy mines to run.
Yes.
And if you do not have good people like Low Billingsley and his team underneath him, supporting him and looking for those rough pebbles out there, it's really, it gets challenging. And so they're doing a fantastic job. And then on this community front, whether it's the team up in Canada and what the things they've done on the community, or it's the expansion of what's going on down in Mexico. You don't receive ESR awards 10 plus years in a row and being recognized 3 times as the #1 small business in all of Mexico without doing things right. And now Alfredo Phillips and the team down there that support him around that are doing a fantastic job for us as well. So we get the opportunity. That's what Dan and I get. It's really the support group and their ability to construct and find the financing and all the other things that have to come to play that really make it for us.
I appreciate that very much. Humble and a beautiful share, Peter. I have to say you're one of the more smooth presenters that we have the pleasure to welcome to our conference each time. And you've once again shared a really great overview of where the company's at, what the vision is, and where the potential lies. We're leading up to our wonderful midday session with Byron King from Whiskey and Gunsmoke. But before we do that, I just want to offer any last thoughts that you have for our audience today, Peter.
Yeah, I'll end with where I started. I think that the company provides that safety net with those operatings and those operating cash flows, surrounded by all the sizzle of an exploration story and that re-rate hockey stick potential of that development story. And we do it with a low risk type approach. And I think it's one that a story that's resonating well right now in the markets today. And I think it's one that will continue to grow over time, and quite excited about what we've been able to build here and where things are going in the future.
Beautiful, Peter. Well said. Thank you very much for all the inside perspective. Appreciate the vision of where the company is going and what to watch for. And as always, we'll be watching the company closely and look forward to our next chance to speak to you.
Okay, great. And thank you, Mark. And thank you, all those viewers and listeners today.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. And to everyone watching, once again, as we end this webinar, you'll be automatically redirected to a survey. We welcome your feedback. And then beyond that, you'll be directed to our top of the hour session. We have the great pleasure of welcoming a fantastic industry perspective from editor Byron King from Whiskey and Gunsmoke. So I'll say so long for now. And in a few short moments, we'll see you again at the top of the hour. Peter, thank you again. Be well, and we'll look forward to our next time with you.
Thank you very much.